Hi there, this is Vanessa Otero. I'm the founder and CEO of Advantes Media, and I wanted to make a video going through an article in the New York Times in response to a question that we got from a student. So, for that student, thank you for writing in about this question. The question was, yeah, she had this school assignment, a homework assignment for in high school, trying to create a report and finding as minimally biased, unbiased reporting as she can from about the ICE shooting of Alex Petty in Minneapolis this weekend. And she said, I'm having a hard time because there's always it's like some bias. It's apparent when I go and read all the various different news stories. So let's talk about what we would look for and what's like ideal when we're talking about a fact reporting story. And I'm going to use this New York Times one because it's a pretty good example. I think it does a pretty good job of being like as minimally biased and like fact reporting as possible. Doesn't mean it's like completely without bias, but a couple of things to remember about news stories and like what we can and should expect from them. So when you're trying to find the most fact-based, least biased content, you want to look for like the literal presence and number of verifiable fact statements. And that might seem like really straightforward, but it's actually a little bit harder for journalists to actually accomplish that. You can have there's a lot of different types of content that you can have in a news outlet. So you for each story can only cover so much. I mean, most news stories are like 400 to 800 words, and some of them are a lot longer, some of them are a lot shorter, but you can literally only cover 800 words of anything. So if you're going to talk about one topic, there's usually a main story. Like they're trying to bring you facts about like the one story that you're talking about. So when you're talking about like the shooting, you could talk about a lot of things in relation to the shooting that might be relevant, but you'd have to make choices about like what to include or not include. So here's a type of content that you can include in a particular news story. You can include facts just about that story, like as tightly as you can. The next thing you can include is contextual facts. What's the difference between facts about the story and contextual facts? Well, these are other facts that are true and easily proven, like they're verifiable, but they're not necessarily about exactly the story. The more contextual they are, means that they're more related, they're more relevant, and they're timely. So they're about things that are very close in time or close in topic to the initial facts. So you have facts about the story and then contextual facts. And contextual facts can be really important, but contextual facts themselves can introduce bias because, like, you have all the facts in the world to possibly choose from. So your choices are inherently going to introduce some selectivity. You just cannot help it, okay? But that kind of bias is okay. I'll show you an example of what I mean. You can also have analysis statements like conclusions, statements of meaning, predictions, um, and that can introduce even more bias. So that gets further away from the facts that you're looking at. And analysis can definitely introduce a lot more bias. Then you have opinion. So opinion, the difference between analysis and opinion is more conclusory and opinion is less tied to facts. So the more opinion you have, like you're getting a lot more bias. So you've got facts about the story, contextual facts about the story. It can introduce some bias, analysis statements, and opinion statements. All right. So if we're going to talk about one story with as many facts, let's look at this example. And I want to acknowledge that, like, I'm taking a very like clinical look at like the sentence and the rhetorical structure of this story, but it's also like a really horrifying and like awful and like heart-wrenching topic. I've read a lot about this story over the last couple of days, and that may contribute to my like desensitization about that. So it's not out of lack of like sympathy or like real emotional reaction that I've definitely had to this story, but I want to make a point about what we're looking for and examples of of fact reporting about a story. So we're going to actually go sentence by sentence. So I'll create a shorter version of this video that just dives into an example like further down. But here's what we're looking at. Timeline, a moment by moment look at the shooting of Alex Pretty. And there's one, two, three, four, five, six people on this byline. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of reporters working on this story, probably because there's a lot of individual facts that needed to be verified, and a lot of individual like video clips and things that needed to be put together in order to like create factual, to describe this as factually as possible. So that's a good sign, like when you're looking for reporting about a particular story that's fact dense, having a lot of reporters on the byline, that's kind of unusual to have this many. Like one person is common, two people is pretty common. But having three or more, that means they really put a lot of effort into this article. Okay, so let's look at the structures of statements. We're looking just for facts, like verifiable facts. Federal agents shot and killed a 37-year-old Minneapolis resident, Alex Jeffrey Pretty, at about 9 a.m. Central Time on Saturday morning. So this is like the who, what, when happened. It says shot and killed. Other folks will characterize this as murder, which is a slightly more conclusory statement, and is not really necessary for like this is accurate without stating murder, which like it has other connotations about like intent and guilt and being proven in court and stuff like that. So, shot and killed is an accurate and like as straightforward a way as you can say the facts of this case. A video shared with the New York Times by a witness and her lawyer, as well as other footage posted on social media, documents the violent scene. And there's a citation to that. So, so when they're talking about how they sourced it, that's helpful to so you know like what steps they've taken to verify it. So they don't usually talk about everything that they do to source and verify stuff, but usually outlets, the highest reliability, most factual outlets will try to talk about how they sourced this. So this was like something that they have seen. It was shared by the witness and her lawyer. Other footage posted on social media, I would assume that they've verified this as well, just because they go through other steps of verification. It says documents a violent scene. They do hyperlink to other things, other stories where like why might they do that? Because they want to show like that this other article that they're linking to might have other details that are not exactly the facts of this story, that help it add to the content in here. So hyperlinking to other things that support the facts in this case, that's also a helpful thing. Where agents appear to fire at least 10 shots in a span of 5 seconds. The footage seems to contradict the Department of Homeland Security's account of the encounter, which the agency said, and then if you hover over this link, it says the agency said, and then if you look in the bottom corner of this browser here, bottom left corner, it says the URL. It goes to x.com/dhsgov.status. And if we click on it, so you can either click on it to see exactly what they're linking to, or you can just like hover over it and see like, okay, I know what statement they're talking about. Okay. All right. So this is like what DHS posted. All right, which agency said began after an individual armed with a handgun approached the federal agents with the intent to, quote, massacre them. So this is actually a really important like decision on how to like frame the statements of the Department of Homeland Security and you know there's other government statements in here that they have to make a choice on. Okay, so one of the problems one of the practices that journalists go through when they've been doing this for a long time is they get quotes from the sides, like witnesses and people involved in the story, and it's been very common over the last like 60, 70 or more years of journalism to like go out and seek comment from news sources, from like people that are involved. And not only to source those comments to inform the story, but also to print and include those statements or portions of those statements in the content itself, in the piece itself. These days, it's like a little bit more, it's a little bit more fraught, right? You don't, uh, and it's not necessarily a great choice for the journalist to just get a statement from somebody and then just print it in the newspaper. Because when something is like printed in the newspaper, it's just taken as true. So this has been a problem since before this current era, where people would complain like, oh, this newspaper is carrying water for the government, they just quoted whatever the government says, and like they and now people think it's true. Well, that's a recognition that like journalists have a responsibility in the first instance. Like if somebody quotes something and they're going to print it, well, they should try to verify whether the thing that's being said is true or not. And this is especially a problem now because there have been serious credibility issues with the Department of Homeland Security statements and President Trump's statements or JD Vance's statements about this and about other related incidents. So like when you have a credibility issue with one of the parties that you're quoting, then you like really got to think about like how helpful is it for me to quote something? Like, yes, it's a fact that they said that, but they're asking you to like if you print that quote, you're presenting it a little bit like it is the facts. So here they made a choice to say the footage seems to contradict the Department of Homeland Security's account of the encounter. And then they link to the statement. Like you can go find the statement. And one reason like journalists don't need to really print the quotes in the newspaper these days anymore is because these quotes are being said directly to people on social media. Like Trump doesn't have to get his stuff quoted in the newspaper. He just like writes it on True Social. People can broadcast stuff on YouTube. There's like lots of direct to public communication that they can reference. So um, it, taking those statements and like verifying what you can about those statements is a good approach. It's a more ideal approach. So they didn't say Department of Homeland Security obviously lied. They didn't even say lied. They didn't even characterize it that way. They said seems to contradict. And some people will criticize them for saying, oh, they said seems to contradict or apparently contradicts. Why don't you just say, obviously they lied? Well, that judgment again is not super necessary. Like this is an accurate way of stating it without being like heavy-handed or introducing their own bias. Like, so they didn't say murder and they didn't say lied, but they did say shot and killed, and they did say seems to contradict. And that is, again, about as straightforwardly as you can say these things. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so it began after an individual armed with a handgun approached the federal agents with the intent to massacre them. So it says seems to contradict, and they don't really need to do much more about saying why this contradicts that because they're about to show you, like with fact statements, why this video contradicts that statement. So 48 seconds before the shooting. This is context that they added to this like these are contextual facts. So this is I mean, it's definitely about this story, but they added Mr. Petty filming the scene, immigration agent, civilian in the brown coat, a civilian with orange backpack. So this is like very relevant. It's like highly related to this particular story. So adding that, I think, is a good addition of contextual facts for understanding because it's blurry. Kind of, it would be hard to see. You wouldn't necessarily know that this is an immigration agent and then these are civilians, and this is Mr. Petty. So adding that super helpful. Videos, and you can assume that like given all the other evidence, like all the byline stuff that they went to like great lengths to verify this that they're including in here. Videos show a small group of civilians standing in the middle of a street where a person was detained on the ground. Fact statement. The civilians are speaking to federal agents. Fact statement. Mr. Preddy appears to be filming the scene and he walks closer to the federal agents while holding his phone. Fact statement. Just purely descriptive. Then an agent shoves two civilians from one side of the street to the other, pushing them toward a white SUV. Fact statement. All right, so you have agent pushing civilian to the ground, Mr. Preddy, civilian in the brown coat, civilian with orange backpack, white SUV. Okay, this is and then they caption this. This is a still from the video shared with the Times. For a second time, the agent pushes the civilian with the orange backpack. The civilian falls to the ground near the white SUV. Okay. So, civilian in the brown coat, Mr. Preddy, um, the civilian with orange backpack, agent pepper sprays a group, and you actually can see pepper spray and his hand up here, and then Mr. Preddy holding a phone. So that contradicts the statement that you know, an individual, like the agency said, an individual armed with a handgun approached the federal agents with the intent to massacre them. Like this video appears to contradict that. Mr. Preddy tries to put himself between the DHS agent and the two civilians. Footage shows the same agent squirting pepper spray in the direction of Mr. Preddy's face. Fact statement. This agent will later fire shots at Mr. Preddy. Fact statement about this story. So far, pretty much every sentence in here is a fact statement about this story. That's what we're looking for in a highly reliable, minimally biased story. Mr. Preddy is holding a phone in his hand, and he holds his other hand up to shield himself from the spray. Fact statement, 23 seconds before. Again, they're showing they've got contextual facts that they layered on top of the photo. Mr. Preddy appears to be trying to help the civilian with the orange backpack stand back up as the agent continues to pepper spray the group. Fact statement, 17 seconds before. So here's another shot of the still from a video by witness shared with the Times. So again, they're talking about their sourcing. Mr. Preddy showing his phone, holding his phone. Several agents grab Mr. Preddy, who is still holding his phone. Additional agents approach and try to pin Mr. Preddy to the ground. Fact statements. All right, so 11 seconds before, Mr. Preddy is restrained by multiple agents. Agent in a gray coat, because that's going to become important in the description again. Mr. Preddy is surrounded by a group of 7 agents, some of whom have wrestled him to the ground. Fact statements. One of the agents who wears a gray coat gets closer to Mr. Preddy. Fact statement. The agent's hands are empty as he reaches for Mr. Preddy while the other agents hold Mr. Preddy down on his knees at the same, again, fact statements. At the same time, another agent strikes Mr. Preddy repeatedly with a pepper spray canister again. So this is from the video. Okay, so 1 second before, and you can actually they're including they're only including stills from this video to like show you like the important moments, but they are describing things from that are not shown here that you can assume would be seen in the video, which they have linked to. So at the same time, another agent strikes Preddy repeatedly with a pepper spray canister. So you can assume that that is supported by the actual videos if you were to go in a different article and see the videos. Okay, so civilian in brown coat, civilian with orange backpack. Agent unholsters his weapon here. Agent in gray coat appears to remove a gun. An 8th agent joins the group. The agent in the gray coat appears to pull a gun from Mr. Preddy's right hip. Fact statement, fact statement. The agent then begins to move away from the skirmish with a weapon. Fact statement about the story. At the same time, another agent unholsters his firearm and points at Mr. Preddy's back. Fact statement about the story. All right, first shot fired. So agent in gray coat removes gun from skirmish. The agent in the gray coat removes their weapon from the scene. Fact statement. And matches the profile of a gun that DHS says belonged to Mr. Preddy. Contextual, this is a contextual fact. It's not like directly description of this, but that's a very, very relevant fact. And then that's so like this is the Department of Homeland Security's statement. They said this is the gun, and they're saying that like it matches the profile of a gun that DHS says belonged to Mr. Preddy. So they're characterizing this as accurately as they can without being able to verify that that is actually his gun. Like they don't know that. So they didn't say that they knew that for sure. They said it matches the profile of a gun. So they're putting together so that's why we're calling this a contextual fact, because they don't know it directly just from watching this. All right. Then while Mr. Preddy is on his knees and restrained, the agent standing directly above him appears to fire one shot at Mr. Preddy at close range. Fact statement. He immediately fires 3 additional shots. Fact statement. The diagram below shows the position of the agents, Mr. Preddy, and other civilians at this moment. And so this is just a diagram to help with understanding. Again, these are contextual facts but very, very relevant, highly related to the story. So, contextual facts are really important. They help understand because like you could just watch like you could watch this video by itself and you'd see you'd see the facts like they would all be there, but you wouldn't necessarily have all the understanding without like line by line description and without these contextual if facts that explain like what you are seeing and looking at that they've verified. Additional shots fired. Two agents who fired shots. Mr. Petty lying on the ground. Um, Several agents have moved away from Mr. Preddy, who has collapsed. Back statement about the story. Another agent, the same one who shoves the civilians into the street and pepper sprayed Mr. Preddy, unholsters his gun and fires at Mr. Preddy. Fact statement. The first agent also fires additional shots. Fact statement. Together, they fire 6 more shots at Mr. Preddy while he lies motionless on the ground. Fact statement. At least 10 shots appear to have been fired within 5 seconds. I'm not sure why they say appear to have been fired. Maybe just because they're not, um, they from the sound of the video they count 10. Um, but to say that definitively, maybe you'd want other evidence from the scene, like spent shell casings or something like that, that would happen after an investigation. By the moment of the 10th shot, the agent who moved away with a weapon has crossed the street. Fact statement. Why might they include that fact statement? Maybe to show that like Mr. Preddy did not have his gun on him, perhaps. Okay. So Mr. Preddy is the second person to be shot and killed by a federal agent in Minnesota in recent weeks. Um, so now they're introducing a fact about something else. That's like there was another shooting in Minnesota. This is a contextual fact. It's related to this story, but it's not about this story. Footage of Mr. Preddy's death in Minneapolis was posted on social media almost immediately after the shooting. Again, contextual fact that it was posted on social media. Okay. But again, highly relevant. So far, none of the contextual facts, I don't think, are I don't think any of them introduce significant bias because they're very related. They're very relevant to this story, and they're very timely. A Homeland Security Department, but this is the second person. This is not about this story. Now it's about another fact of another story. So you when it's not about this story, that's a choice. So why would they choose to include something about the other shooting? Maybe to indicate that this is like there is a greater problem. This is not just like a one-off incident. That seems like a reason to include that. Um, so let's see what other contextual facts are in here. The Homeland Security Department said that the episode had began after a man approached Border Patrol agents with a handgun and that an agent fired defensive shots. Now, at this point, like they are again referring to a statement, like an external statement from the Homeland Security. And all of this video evidence has like contradicted that, but they haven't said that. They didn't say, again, this is contradicted by the video evidence. They're just laying out the facts and like you can put like two and two together that like doesn't look like he approached him with a handgun at all. Here's an interesting line. Another encounter in Minneapolis this month, in which a Venezuelan man was shot in the leg by a federal agent, was also characterized as defensive by the department. So I think this is the most biased line in here. This is another contextual fact. This is not about this. It's not about this story. It's about another shooting where so they put like defensive shots. They said this sentence where the Border Patrol agents said that they said Homeland Security said the Border Patrol agents fired defensive shots, and at this point we're like, well, that's not true. And then they put this other line said, and they say, which is also characterized as defensive by the department. So one big reason for putting that line in there is to like compare contrast, like, this time they said it was defensive. There was that other time they said it was defensive too. Maybe that casts doubt on that first defensive one. So that's a choice. Is it relevant to this? Yes. Is it timely? Pretty timely. Does it introduce bias? Yes. But is that an inappropriate level of bias? Like, is that a like we're drawing the conclusion ourselves? That sentence is there, so we draw the conclusion. Is that an inappropriate level of bias? Eh, it's kind I think other depending on how you view the situation from a political perspective, you might think it's more or less appropriate. But overall, it's pretty minimal. One contextual fact. Governor Tim Walz, Democrat of Minnesota, disputed the claims by federal officials that Mr. Petty had posed a threat. He accused the most powerful people in the government, quote, the most powerful people in the federal government, quote, of spinning stories and putting up pictures. All right, so again, there's a choice to include the quotes of parties from various sides of this case. So again, uh, they said he disputed the claims, and they quoted part of his story, part of his statement. Again, when you put part of a statement in there, people tend to like give some weight, some credence to what's printed in there. Chief Brian O'Hara of the Minneapolis Police Department said that Mr. Petty was an American citizen with no criminal record and that he had a valid firearms permit. This is a contextual fact. So it's no longer about the timeline of him being shot. It's about who he was, whether his citizenship status, his lack of a criminal record, and the fact that he had a valid firearms permit. All relevant, all timely. They do have the possibility of introducing bias. Under Minnesota law, citizens can legally carry a handgun in public, either openly or concealed, if they have a permit. Again, another contextual fact. As with the fatal shooting of Renee Good, local and state authorities in Minnesota say that they have been impeded by DHS from investigating the killing of Mr. Petty, and they have been cut off from access to crucial evidence of facts. Again, contextual fact about not well, I think it's a little closer because it's about this shooting, but it's not about the timeline. It's not about the video. It's about like what's been happening after. Large crowds of protesters gathered throughout Saturday at the site of Mr. Petty's shooting. Again, this is not about the video anymore. This is about the protests after. On Sunday afternoon, around 1,000 people packed Government Plaza in downtown Minneapolis to protest the presence of federal agents in the city and to call for justice for Ms. Good and Mr. Petty. Again, another contextual fact. Timely, relevant, yes. So everything you have in this story is either a direct fact about the timeline that is about the story, or it is a contextual fact that's pretty closely related. You might be able to find like a little bit of bias in, I think the most bias you can find is in this one sentence that sort of makes you think maybe the Border Patrol is lying about the other incident. But really clean, very well done story. That's what I would look for in reporting, minimally biased reporting. We didn't see any analysis in here. We didn't see any opinions in here. That's kind of rare. If you go line by line on other articles, even from other reputable news sources, you will tend to see more characterizations, analysis, opinion in there. So hope that is helpful. And to the student, thanks for writing in. I hope this is helpful with your assignment.